This episode will be the longest from this 3 episodes video series, let's call it this way. And let's continue our journey through DevOps Days. This time I will tell you a little bit about DevOps Days in Poland. In the last video, I explained a little bit shortly what DevOps Days are. In this, I'm gonna tell you about few things about Polish edition, about 2 Polish editions really, and then you'll have the chance to watch the interview with one of the speakers. I hope you will enjoy it. Without going into history too much, we run 2 DevOps Days in Poland currently. By calendar, the Krakow edition is first, somewhere in the spring, followed by Warsaw one in autumn. Both are 2 days long. Generally, DevOps Days are 2 days long. Both are done by community for the community. As I mentioned in the first episode, this is like a core rule for DevOps Days. Organizers are mainly the same for both editions too. And both are managed in the way to give the best possible speakers and knowledge to the attendees. We really care about that, and I hope we do the good job here. DevOps Days in Krakow are relatively young. We held the 5th edition this year and 2nd in person. You know, few years ago we had pandemic, that's why everything went online. This is the reason why we have only just the 2nd one in person. What is really cool about this edition? For me, many familiar faces, many people who attended the last conference a year ago, and a lot of people engage into open space and ignites. What are the ignites and open spaces? I explained this in the 3rd video. Much more known and run for longer is Warsaw edition. Of course, Warsaw is easier to access for Poles, and not only by Poles, as it is located almost in the center of the country and it has very good communication. We have like couple of hundreds of attendees, and the structure is pretty the same like during the Krakow edition and like other DevOps Days everywhere really. There are 2 tracks during the conference, and almost always is this way. After the official opening, you can select a track and enjoy the sessions. Usually there are like 6 or 10 talks or something between per day. We need time to other activities. I mentioned those other activities just a couple of seconds before, and I will explain them in the next episode. And what next? What else? Talks are mostly technical, and most appreciated are those with live coding. And yes, live coding is extremely risky during the conference, because if something can go wrong, will go wrong. So you can have problems with internet connection, you can have problems with your demo environment, and many other things can happen. But still, this is the most enjoyable part of each talk. However, I held the Best Talk Award in one of previous edition, and my talk was strictly high level. No demo, so everything is possible. Beside the activities I already mentioned, the most important is networking. There is plenty of time for this. There is plenty of time to network with other people, coffee breaks, lunch, after parties, those activities which I will mention. I said this for the 3rd time, I think, in this short video. Also discussions at partners and sponsors booth. All these gives the opportunity to talk about technology, DevOps, practices, what's going on in the market, and many, many other things. It's time to give you another interview. This time I chat with Tomasz Konieczny about the conference and public speaking, so enjoy. Here we are with Tomasz. Tomasz already gave a talk about kubetest. If I may ask, why did you decide to talk about this specific technology on DevOps, DevOpsDays conference?
Yeah, so I work for the Testkube project, and I just consider it as something interesting because that's the area of things where I worked for in the last few years before even I joined the Testkube project. Mm-hmm. So the most common problem for QA engineers is that the tests aren't fast enough, and I try to solve it in very different ways previously. I tried doing it with AWS Lambdas, and then at some point I was able to join the Testkube project, and it was almost the same thing, but with Kubernetes this time.
Got it.
Yeah.
By the way, you probably heard the voice of new batch of DevOps people. Do you see any space still in Kubernetes world for this kind of test tools, operators, whatever we call it?
Yeah, I think it's the very, very common problem that the tests aren't handled in the correct way. I mean, the feedback isn't fast enough, or the tests aren't run in the right moment, or they are just run too late. Mm-hmm. So in general, I think that trying to shift left is the right approach. To run these tests as soon as possible in the development process. I mean, the requirements level, or before even code is implemented, and then as soon as possible, as it's possible to run it with actual code.
I'm curious, you mentioned the speed of the test, and this is something what we suffer very often, right? Because tests are long, especially if we do end-to-end tests and things like that. I wonder, was this like main focus when you started with kubetest, or was there anything else?
So as I mentioned, I mean, I tried to solve this problem in very different ways previously, but then when I found the project that tries to do the same thing, I just decided it's worth joining. I just consider these things as interesting because, I mean, they are that common for me. In every single project I work for, I had this problem that the tests weren't fast enough initially. Okay. And the main effort was speeding them up, and then having very different test types, and having to handle them in very different ways. And I mean, all of these different tools that need to be introduced, and all of these tests that need to be maintained, and then the infrastructure part, that's just a prerequisite to run these. I mean, that's not something I would like to spend a lot of time on in the project where I actually need to deliver something.
Got it.
And from my perspective, I mean, as the QA engineer, the goal is to assure the quality of the product. And again, even the tests are something that are just a prerequisite for it to give me the feedback. But then being able to run these tests easily, it was a really important thing to handle infrastructure in a simple way. So that's why I decided to join Testkube, because it just tries to solve this problem in the way that's possible without any vendor lock-in. I mean, it's open source, and at the same time, it can be run fully on-prem, so without any external dependencies.
That's great.
I'm a fan of open source in general, so that's for me.
So this leads me to the last question. Can I test OpenTofu using kubetest?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible to run any kind of tests. So as long as it's possible to containerize something, and it's you have some Docker image and you can run it in standard way, then you can probably use Testkube for it, because it's just an abstraction over almost everything. With custom container executor, it's possible to just run any Docker image that you need there, and still use this abstraction that Testkube provides, so an aggregation of logs, handling of executions, scheduling, which is handled by Kubernetes specifically. Testkube is, again, just an abstraction over it, so it just makes things simpler to schedule, to manage, to extract the logs, and to have this specific abstraction. So being able to version the way how to execute the test along with actual tests. So this one was also really important for me because it's also a common problem that it's not that easy to version things even with Docker images because then running them may be inconsistent, and the goal is to have the pipelines as predictable as possible. So
and as we know, the best practice of naming the containers or label the containers is to give them label latest, right? Always. So this is the test for you not test, but like a challenge. Check if OpenTofu can be tested with Testkube. Thank you very much, Tomasz, for joining me, and see you out there. Thank you.
If you want to attend or speak during DevOps Days in Poland in particular, and of course DevOps Days in general, now you know how it might look. And I know that it looks a little bit strange that I'm looking like somewhere around the camera, but I'm still completing my gear, so I don't have everything yet, so that's why it looks strange. Sorry for that, but it is what it is. In next and last video of this short series about DevOps Days, I will explain what Ignites and open spaces are. And for the interview, well, it will be a big one, because I will chat with one of the organizers of the DevOps Days in Poland, and I believe the most experienced one between the group who is organizing the DevOps Days in Poland right now. So stay tuned.